My hands know how to make rooms behave. Angles submit to graphite. Light obeys when I open walls. Chaos quiets when I draw a line and give it a name. Milan hums outside my window. Vespas, heels, espresso cups trembling on saucers. But on my drafting table there is only silence and the stubborn shiver of tracing paper when the radiator clicks on. I keep the window cracked because I like the city to argue with me while I work. It loses. I've built a life where it loses. Order is a language, and I've spent my 20s learning to speak it fluently. I learned to sheath hunger inside measurements, to train grief until it can pass as a scale drawing. I learned to comfort myself with the arithmetic of load and span. I learned that if you give a wall a reason, it will stay. Before the email, before all of it, I was a woman with a ritual. Wake at 6:10, coffee like ink. Half a peach if the season cooperates. 2 stretches that remind my back not to become the curve of the chair. I answer 3 messages from clients pretending that budget constraints are philosophy. I nod at the sainted radiator. I tape down a fresh sheet. I begin again, like prayer. There was a year when I could not begin. I was 10, and the apartment was small enough that you could smell what everyone felt. My mother was good at pretending we were fine, which is a kind of design if you think about it. We had a cat named Nero who treated the world like it was a rehearsal for something he didn't plan to attend. The fire was not mythic, no roaring dragon swallowing the building in a righteous hour. It was a tired, ordinary wire inside the wall behind our stove, a neglected sigh that decided to become a sentence. What I remember most is not the flame, but the angle of the hallway, how it funneled smoke into the rooms we loved and refused to give it a way out. I remember my mother, mouth tight, trying to hold a towel over the gap under my door. I remember Nero's disapproval. I remember the color of our fear, a choked brown, and the way it moved as if it had learned us by heart. Afterward, we slept on an aunt's couch. The ceiling there had hairline cracks that ran like roads no one had the money to pave. I lay awake and learned something children shouldn't. Chaos has architecture, too. It prefers corridors that narrow, windows painted shut, stairwells that hoard breath. I didn't know the word egress. I only knew I wanted one. When people ask why architecture, I say something technical about proportion and light. What I mean is once a hallway almost kept us. I have dedicated my life to teaching rooms to forgive. That morning, I am translating a stubborn corridor into something that forgives human error. A small bend that catches light. A brass handrail that warms under skin when the email appears like a silver fish in a dark river. La Rosa Nera. It does not announce itself with drama. It arrives in my inbox as neatly as a stranger who knows your name. Subject line, proposal request, restoration lead, body, polite, exquisite, and almost unreal. The sentences are the kind that have been rehearsed in expensive rooms, each comma flossed, each period placed like a final touch of scent. A shuttered coastal hotel, a history of unfortunate incidents, the opportunity of a lifetime. Could we meet this evening to discuss scope? The signature block is conspicuously modest. A foundation logo in grayscale, a generic inquiries address, a phone number with no person to blame. I think of my mentor and the sticky note at the edge of my monitor, curled, adhesive tired, his tiny, neat handwriting. Know who's paying for the marble. His voice from years ago. You can draw a saint's nave Isabella. But if the money is unblessed, the light will come in crooked. I stare until the screen times out and my reflection blooms over the black glass. Knotted hair, ink on my thumb. A woman who pretends she's not superstitious and wears the same necklace to meetings anyway. I touch the chain at my throat like it might answer for me. La Rosa Nera. I know the name the way you know an old song. Half melody, a rumor of a chorus. Tragedy once lived there, people said. Parties, too. If you believed the tabloids, the Moretti family's shadow lengthened across its balconies like a sundial. I wake the glass. It behaves. The fish is still there, waiting. The punctuation is too careful. The word incidents is doing an amount of work that should qualify for hazard pay. A second email has followed the first, nearly identical in content, but sent 3 minutes later from a personal assistant with a first name only, as if the foundation were rehearsing how to sound human. The invitation is for a restaurant on the water that most people call by a nickname because speaking its full name makes their wallets remember betrayal, destiny, is a word people use when hard work arrives dressed as a miracle. I tell myself this as I mouse toward reply. I tell myself to breathe. My cursor hovers, and in the small muscle of my index finger, I feel the soft hammer of my pulse, ridiculous and disloyal. Yes, I write, then replace it with a sentence that looks more like a professional consent and less like a confession. I choose a time no one will stop and press send. The little paper plane icon does its smug lap around my screen, and somewhere a host is being told to expect me. The afternoon is a polite animal. It does not bite. I pretend to work. I fail. I revise my hair into a version of itself that the world will not mistake for uncertainty. I polish my shoes as if they are answers. I change my blouse because the first one makes me look like I apologize in elevators. The restaurant is one of those quiet places that swallow their own fame and serve it back to you as discretion. The door opens with the sigh of wood that was cut from a forest where trees grew with time and were not sorry about it. Linen like snowdrifts. Glassware that shines only if you look away. The floor is marble, the sort that believes in itself. Somewhere, truffles are performing their expensive earth trick. The host greets me by name before I give it. Signor Moretti's party, he says, as if he is saying the weather, as if he is saying inevitable. His tie is the specific black of men who never have pet hair on anything. He does not ask if I know where I'm going. He does not look at me to see if I do. 2 men wait near the entrance. They are what happens when punctuation wants a body. Not bulky, this is not that kind of show. They are tidy and watchful and make the air thick around the doorway, like a curtain you have to agree to push through. One of them glances at my hands and files away the graphite. I feel inventoried and do not know whether to be flattered. I should turn around. My mentor used to say, know what room you're walking into before your foot crosses the threshold. But the threshold is already behind me, and the room has made its decision about me. A waiter leads me through a corridor of framed sepia summers, women with hair tied in scarves, men smiling with a secrecy that seems to have been fashionable, and into a private dining room, where the ocean has been trapped in a window and asked to behave. At the table, a figure rises. He does not rush. He does not perform the rise as theater. He stands like a man accustomed to standing for others, which is either respect or strategy. Isabella. My name is a certainty in his mouth. Nothing so small as a question. I have seen men in suits all my life, men who perform the idea of power with cufflinks and volume. He wears his like an apology, or a weapon he's grown tired of. Dark hair, blue eyes, the kind of face that makes people confess to crimes they haven't committed. He is not beautiful the way actors are beautiful. He is beautiful the way thunderheads are beautiful when the air tastes metallic, and someone, somewhere, is already counting. Leo Moretti, he says. The name moves across the table between us and expands until there is no table, only the space we are not yet filling. There is a pause that is not awkward, because it knows its own worth. In that pause, I consider the way his gaze rests. Not prowling, not greedy, simply calibrated, like a surveyor finding his line. Thank you for meeting me, I say. And I am proud of the way my voice doesn't break. Order is posture. Order is the straight line of my shoulders as I sit. He watches, attentive but not hungry, and some part of me that grew up studying men for patterns idles and recalibrates. He waits until I reach for the water before he speaks again, a courtesy I clock without wanting to. La Rosa Nera needs a patient hand, he says, a precise one. He gestures and a folder appears, borne from air by someone who was always in the room. It needs yours. I flip pages because pages are safe. Plans, photographs, structural reports with their sober warnings. The bones are loyal, the reinforced concrete of a certain decade, the stubborn marble that refuses to be merely cold. But the history breathes like an animal beneath the glassine overlays. Fires, closures, settlements. The official language of bad luck. Who owns it? I ask, though the answer sits in a chair across from me and watches the ocean pretend to be still. My foundation acquired the deed last year. His tone is conversational. It does not invite me closer. It does not push me away. We plan a full restoration. New beginning, we? My finger rests on a photograph of the main atrium. The ceiling collapsed inward like a throat. You and your board? He smiles. The expression is small and private, like a secret undressing. We? he echoes, and the word is smoke that doesn't sting the eyes. I'll be present, interested, useful if you allow it. There are questions I do not ask because they would sound like fear. Who else will be present? Useful how? Which version of your name is seated at this table? The philanthropist with his art catalogs, the collector of rare woods and rarer debts, or the shadow that newspapers can't quite photograph? Instead, I ask for timeline, budget, constraints. I speak in glass thickness and load calculations and the way humidity changes Wood's memory. He listens in a way that makes the word listening too small. When he leans forward, it is not to interrupt but to receive. The subtle tilt of his head suggests he is recording not just my words, but the curve of my certainty, and the places I hesitate before I divulge more than the plan requires. I know, suddenly and with heat, how it would feel to be studied by him elsewhere, nearer. I press my palms flat on the folder and think about brass. Dinner arrives like choreography, and I remember to eat because an architect who faints is an anecdote men enjoy telling each other. A waiter pours wine with the care of someone setting a fragile instrument back in its case. His hand shakes imperceptibly when Leo glances up. The fork against my plate makes a sound like a door being tested. He compliments a detail from one of my prior restorations without using my name, that chapel off Via Costanza. It breathes like someone taught stone to pray. His voice crosses the table and grazes the soft place under my jaw. The lemon on my glass decides it has been caught doing something indecent and trembles accordingly. You visited? I ask, and there is a boundary in the word I intend him to notice. He does. He lowers his gaze to his plate in a gesture that is almost modesty, which is absurd. I study good work, he says. It keeps me honest. Honest, I think, and watch the word enter him and fail to find a chair. I pretend technicality will save me. I talk about thermal bridging and the way certain plasters refuse to forget a century. He nods through the technicality as if reading music beneath my speech. The talk turns, slow as a tide, until he's not asking about stone at all. Do you always measure perfection? He asks. Or do you ever just feel it? The question slips under my dress like a hand and rests, patient. I am not naive enough to pretend I don't hear what lives under it. I lift my glass. The ice thinks briefly about being water again. I don't trust feelings, I say. They don't hold a line. They hold people, he replies, and there is a brief, unguarded warmth in it. Often when lines cannot. The room hums. The ocean rattles its jewelry against the window and calls no one's name. I am not sure whether we are speaking about a hotel anymore. I am not sure what I'm preparing to restore. He was watching me. I could feel the measure of his patience. How he made a study of the angles of refusal. How he assessed the places where a yes might live. He was not counting victories. He was counting distances. His gaze drifts not to my mouth but my hands, still threaded with graphite at the creases. There's a softness to his attention that makes me want to tuck my hands out of sight, or else give them something to hold that is not a knife or a prayer. After, when the plates disappear and the men near the door turn back into punctuation, he stands. Walk with me, he says, not cruelly. I do. The corridor smells like beeswax and money that is comfortable with itself. Mirrors along the wall host softened versions of us. The safer ones strangers prefer. He doesn't try to touch me. He keeps a respectful, practiced distance, which is itself a kind of touch. As we pause at the threshold, he turns, and his gaze lands, not on my mouth or the bare line of collarbone glancing out from the collar I forgot to button, but on my hands again, as if they hold the blueprint of a story he means to live inside. What did you last build? He asks. That forgave you for your mistakes? The question drops me into a chapel like an unmade bed, stone and silence and the persistent chill of grief that refuses to vacate. I tell him about the summer I turned a ruined sanctuary into a vial for light. I tell him there were skylights that behaved like mercy and floorboards that complained until we convinced them their complaints were a kind of music. I do not tell him I knew it was the site of a murder only after. I do not tell him I sat on the cold floor the night before the dedication and whispered, "If you're here, I'm trying." Forgiveness, he says, the word tasting uncertain in his mouth. Rare in buildings. Rarer in men. The trick, I say, is to design a way out. I don't add, because the world catches fire over stoves and doesn't always give you time to choose shoes. I don't add, because children remember hallways that funnel smoke and call it destiny when they grow up and move walls for a living. He watches me like a confessional listens. I visited after it opened, he says quietly. And there. The first coincidence steps out of its costume and shows me the bullet hole beneath the silk. You changed the room's mind, he says, like a benediction. Like a threat. He was remembering the first time he stood beneath that light and mistook it for absolution. He wanted to see whether the woman who rebuilt a ghost could survive a living man's past. He wondered what I would cost him, and whether the price would prove him to himself. I imagine, against my will, his hand closing around the back of my neck in a gesture not violent, but instructive. The old Italian way men have of saying listen without speaking. I imagine turning my face away. I imagine leaning into the word he doesn't say. I imagine pushing his wrist and walking into the night. I imagine both and do neither. We stop at the final mirror before the exit. It shows me a woman who has been learning to keep her face as if it were a valuable vase, transported carefully, presented sparingly. It shows him as the sort of man mirrors like, because they suspect he might be the one to shatter them and not apologize. A waiter passes in the periphery and slows briefly, as if the air has rippled between two weather systems. He studies the door as if deciding whether to be the one who opens it for me, or the one who simply lets it be opened. His courtesy is not performance. It is policy. I cannot decide which unnerves me more. He was patient the way tides are patient, which is to say not patient at all, only bound by a schedule older than himself. When we part, he thanks me by saying my name again, and I turn to leave because some instincts are wired for survival and others for curiosity. And mine have been bargaining since dinner. The punctuation men resurface, rearranging the doorway to look ordinary. At the door, he adds, "There will be a courier tomorrow. The formalities. Will you sign?" "Send the forms," I say. The word yes lives in my stomach like a coin whose face I haven't looked at. Outside, the night has put on its good black coat and considers rain. The sea speaks in a dialect of restraint. I stand for a moment with the slick ache of the evening in my shoes and realize that some decisions are not made. They are simply recognized when you are finished pretending not to. In the taxi, the city windows my face back at me, thinner or braver, or tired enough to look like both. I touch the necklace again and feel heat where the metal rests, as if my skin has voted. My phone vibrates once in my bag. A calendar placeholder that wasn't there before. An address that I didn't give anyone. A time that is precisely the time I would have chosen. I should be offended. I am, a little. I am also steadied by the competence, which is how women make their mistakes with men like this. We call the choreography safety. We call the inevitability permission. At home, I open my notebook and copy the restaurant's floor plan from memory, because it calms me to put rooms in my own ink. I mark where the punctuation men stood, where the mirrors made us almost honest, where the table centered the ocean like an accusation. I circle the place where he said my name. It looks like any other circle until you know what it contains. I think of my mentor, his warning about marble. I think of my mother, who learned to judge a room by how quickly it would let you out. I think of the chapel, and the way light behaved like it had sworn an oath. Somewhere between the truffles and the door, I forgot to ask for guarantees. Somewhere I decided I would build them myself. On my pillow, sleep does not wait. It has gone somewhere less demanding. I lie in the dark and listen to the night take attendance. Radiator, neighbor, the faint argument of a couple who don't know how lucky they are to be ordinary. I close my eyes and see a compass I do not yet own, already pointing insistently, as if north were a person who wanted to be believed. The sea is a long hand on the city's back, smoothing it toward morning. When I finally sleep, it is the patient, unprofessional kind that does not dress itself in respectability. I wake at 4:13 with the answer already written in my blood. "Yes," the coin whispers, turning. "Yes." "Send the forms," I had said. A woman disciplined enough to keep her lines straight, sentimental enough to hear a future in the friction of a door. The radiator clicks. The window hushes. Somewhere, a courier finds his route in a city that pretends to be complicated and is only proud. I turn my face into the cool of the pillow and try to memorize the angle of this decision. in case I need to draw it later and prove that it existed. In the morning, the inbox will glow with something official and precise, its clauses measured and balanced, its signatures lined up like soldiers who believe they belong to themselves. In the morning, I will touch pen to paper, and someone will call it business. Tonight, it is only a woman in a small room, listening to the city count her heart for her, and a word that has learned how to keep very still until it is time to move. I arrive home to a small square absence on my pillow where sleep should lie waiting. The courier is early. The forms are precise, so is the velvet-lined box I do not expect, parceled separately, weighty with a history that leans forward when I lift the lid. A golden compass, the kind that refuses to pretend the earth is sane, the kind that remembers its north even after men have bargained for it, engraved beneath the lid, so you never lose your way. My heartbeat stands to applaud, and I send it back to its seat. Inappropriate, I tell the empty room, which doesn't entirely believe me. I sign where the paper tells me to sign. Initial here, a clean H there, the loop of my surname trained to behave. The pen leaves a microscopic wobble on one line I blame on caffeine, and not on the fact that a stranger's generosity sits open on my table, pointing like an accusation no one is brave enough to speak. I set the compass on the sill, so the morning has a chance to approve of it. In the reflection of the brass, I borrow a steadier version of my face. The needle quivers, decides, returns to its certainty. I envy it a little. People think architects have certainties. We have tolerances. I tuck the compass into my bag with the ruthless tenderness you reserve for delicate instruments and dangerous gifts. It slides in among pencils and a packet of almonds and my father's old tape measure I do not sentimentalize out loud. I touch the lid once, as if I am patting down a secret. The road to La Rosa Nera is a ribbon the sea tries to keep. Gulls argue the same case they argued yesterday and win it again. My hired car dawdles around a bend where the rock blushes at its own exposure. And then the hotel arrives in my windshield like a memory someone else had for me. 4 stories of faded aristocracy. Iron balconies that have forgotten how to be coy. A facade with the posture of a woman who refuses to apologize for her ruin. La Rosa Nera smells like salt, old paper, and a secret that has begun to rot. The first day I walk its corridors with a hard hat and a soft throat. Men in faded uniforms nod to me and try not to stare. Scaffolding rises like scaffolding always does, fast, provisional, a promise and a hazard. The atrium is a wound with ideas about healing. Someone has draped a canvas over the collapsed ceiling like a bandage that wants to be a curtain. Dust throws confetti at itself in the light. A man meets me by the freight elevator and introduces himself in a voice that has nothing to prove. Paolo, he says. Thick wrists, neat haircut, a posture that suggests he has absorbed more blows than he has given, and resented neither. His brown eyes gave nothing away. Steady, silent, and clean. Security? I ask. He smiles without softness. I keep things from becoming untidy. Then we're colleagues, I say, and his smile widens by exactly 1 tooth. We begin with the tour I could do in my sleep and never permit myself to. The floor lists mildly where concrete remembered the wrong lesson. Balustrades sag into their fate. In the ballroom, plywood has colonized the parquet with the enthusiasm of men who were not paid to admire what they were damaging. I crouch, run my fingers along scarred travertine, peel back the corner of a tarp like a lover opening a letter. The building breathes. I listen. Leo appears without appearing. One moment, a foreman complains about a missing pallet of limestone. The next, the complaint is solved, and there he is where the light breaks and fails by turns. Dark sweater, slate trousers, no tie. The ease of a man whose body understands expensive fabric and the language of other men's attention. He looks at the hole in the ceiling and then at me, the way a patient looks at a surgeon's hands before surrendering. What do you need? He asks. To know who this building thinks it is, I say, surprised at my own answer, and who you want to force it to be. He smiles the way people do when you walk into their private metaphor by accident. We will let it tell us, he says. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He let the room speak first, as if he were fluent in a grammar that measured desire by where people stood and how they inhaled. He was listening to the building. I felt the courtesy of being included in that listening. We walk. He matches my pace. slowing when I stop to trace with my knuckle the border between original plaster and a later lie, waiting while I crouch to peer at a mosaic that survived behind ugliness like a saint hiding from a raid. He carries nothing, no phone, no papers. When the project manager gallops over with an urgent stack of problems, Leo's gaze flicks once, and the mare settles her feet and remembers that most emergencies are simply men trying to make their voices matter. Paolo watches this exchange the way a lighthouse watches weather. Neither impressed nor bored, only alert. I am good at my work. I know this with the calm, unromantic intimacy of knowing my own wrist. Still, as we move through the hotel's compartments, ballroom devoured by storage, corridor sealed for reasons no one quite records, I feel a second attention kneeling beside my usual one. When I speak, it listens not only to my solutions, but to the tiny places my breath catches before I decide whether to reveal them. I tell myself this is professional curiosity. I tell myself many things. By late morning, the crew has learned my rhythms. They wait for my nod with an attentiveness that is not politeness, but the relief of instructions that make sense. An older mason named Vito shows me a hairline fracture that has been telling the same lie for 20 years. We mark it with chalk, like a child who has finally decided to grow. On the east terrace, someone has left an espresso cup on the balustrade, a dark ring cooling on the stone exactly where I tend to stand to take stock. The saucer is weighted down with a paper clip. There is a small smudge on the porcelain, an index finger's ghost. No cigarette, no note, only the outlined possibility of a man who believes in neutrals and control. I do not touch the cup. I do not pretend it isn't exactly where I would have put it if I were thinking of me. Paolo walks past, his boots courteous to the floor. "We'll have this area cleared in an hour," he says, as if he is confessing to punctuality. "Who drinks espresso in my spot?" I ask. "Men who don't need the espresso," he says. "They like to taste decisions." By afternoon, the sea turns the color of a kept secret. The storm thinks about arriving. The air acquires that metallic premonition I have loved since childhood, the way the sky warns you without panicking. The crew disperses, lightning policy etched into our contracts, and the old hotel settles on its haunches to wait for weather. I remain, standing at a window where the glass trembles under the first plucked strings of wind. "You should go," Leo says behind me, gently, like a hand that believes in the vertebrae it meets. "So should you," I answer without turning. He steps into the reflection alongside mine. In the window we are almost touching. In the room we are not. "You received the compass," he says. Not a question. Not quite a claim. It's not. I stop. There is a childish part of me that wants to hide the fact I tucked it into my bag this morning, that it sits now among pencils and almonds like a contraband heartbeat. "Thank you," I say finally, "because gratitude is a kind of armor if you polish it in time. So you never lose your way," he repeats softer, as if returning me to myself or taking me somewhere I didn't plan to go. "Don't try to steer me," I say, and am surprised by the iron in it. His eyes take the measure of that metal and file the edge for later. He looked at me the way architects look at impossible corners, not as defeats, but as invitations. I could feel him deciding what not to do. Restraint is the most dangerous kind of touch. Rain begins as a rumor, then commits. Plastic sheeting inhales and exhales. Scaffolding chitters its disapproval. I gather my rolled plans and one escapes, skittering toward the open arch where wind has opinions. I lunge. So does he. We arrive at the same piece of paper with two hands that dislike competition. His fingers close on the cardboard tube first, the slightest drag of knuckles against mine. Dry, warm, unhurried. I could catalog the contact as incidental. My body fails to accept the classification. A strand of hair escapes and insists on its own drama, tethering itself to the button at his cuff. He pauses, looks, at the hair, at me, then lifts his hand. Slow. He frees the strand from the thread with that same unhurried competence, the kind people have when they are not proving themselves to anyone who matters. "Thank you," I say, "and do not specify for what." "Storm will cut the lights," he says. "Walk with me while they set the generators." We pass through the service corridor where tiles have collected the stories of 100 years and laid them down in grout. The electrical room smells like hot dust deciding whether to be smoke. Two electricians argue in gentle dialect. They stop when Leo enters and forget their own nouns. He does not raise his voice. He only uses it. Paolo, he says, and the man appears as if the name was a doorway. Keep the south stairwell clear. Already done, Paolo answers. And it is not pride. It is choreography. He glances at me as if measuring the distance between my shoes and the nearest honest floor. Signorina, your helmet. I fix the strap under my chin. The gesture ruins the line of my jaw and saves the rest of me. I'm fine, I say. Of course, Paolo says, which in his mouth means good. Then we can proceed to what matters. Back in the atrium, a gust lifts the drooping canvas and gives me a scandalous glimpse of sky. I imagine the ceiling whole again, the coffered panels, the delicate shadow math. Then the image flickers and the room is what it is. A body mid-surgery, all cavities and hope. He watches me sketch with my eyes. You trust the building more than people, he says. It is not accusation. It is cartography. Buildings don't lie, I answer. They just settle. And people? People are always drafting. He smiles, a small, almost private admission. I admire a good draft. Of a person? I ask. Of a person who knows she is revisable and chooses the edits herself. The wind presses its ear to the windows. A coil of rope confesses to being only rope. Somewhere a door slams a door's opinion. I let the compass lid flick open in my bag. A habit already. The needle stutters, finds itself, points through storm and stone to an orientation I am not sure I deserve. He notices the gesture the way hawks notice mice, as proof of life, not conquest. Where did you find it? I ask. Casual the way thieves are casual when they ask about alarms. He considers whether to tell me the partial truth or the whole one. It was my mother's, he says. Her father gave it to her when she left Naples for the north. She said the needle was stubborn like all honest things. And you recovered it? I ask, hearing a verb he did not use and wondering how many men had to forget something for this object to arrive in my hands. Years later, he says, from someone who didn't know what it was. Or perhaps knew and pretended not to for the sport of it. Does it work? I ask, because this is the safer question. It points, he says. Whether you listen is your own affair. He wanted me to hear a story of inheritance, and instead I heard custody. He was not giving me a talisman. He was observing how I carried it. Lightning tries on the shape of the coastline and decides it suits her. The lights gutter and hold. Paolo calls from the stairwell that the generator is sulking but persuadable. I make a note in my head to replace the hallway fixtures with the style that doesn't flinch. We step into the elevator more from habit than necessity. A small box of private air that smells faintly of oil and impatience. The doors slide toward each other like a decision made by committee. His shoulder is close enough that I can feel the coat absorb my heat and refuse to give it back. I keep my plans tight to my chest. A useless shield. If it were only the geometry, he says almost to himself. You would never be afraid. I'm not afraid. I lie politely. The compass would disagree, he says. And when I look down, I realize the lid is open again and the needle is busy, thrilled by the elevator's metal bones and the weather's argument with itself. A shudder passes through the building like a horse remembering a fence. The elevator stops between floors with the pleased sigh of machinery asserting boundaries. The light drops to a single unflattering honesty. We are two living people in a very small room with the idea of gravity. Somewhere below, Paolo is already moving toward us. I can feel his certainty like a rope. Tell me what you need, Leo says quietly. 3 centimeters of play to the right, I answer. And he laughs once, soft and surprised, because only an architect would answer a human question with a spatial command. 3 centimeters, he repeats, and touches the emergency release with the kind of intimacy one usually reserves for names. The doors consent to reconsider. We step out into a landing that smells of wet stone and choice. When we reach the mezzanine, the storm has decided to stay. Tarps ripple. The sea composes itself into a stricter grammar. I roll my plans onto a table that has no right to be beautiful and is anyway. He stands opposite me, hands braced. And for a moment, I see what we will look like to the people who decide these things. A collaboration that was always going to be misnamed. Tomorrow, I say. I want the main atrium cleared by 8. I want Vito on the cornice survey and Enzo on the balcony anchors. I want the scaffolding company to send someone who remembers the last time the wind had a temper. You have it, he says. I wasn't asking, I say, so he will know the grammar I prefer. I wasn't offering, he says, so I will know we understand each other. Wind tugs at a loose corner of my map. His hand lands on the paper to steady it and stays there half a breath too long, not touching me, touching the work between us. Heat travels across cellophane like it has something to prove. I am suddenly and acutely aware of the precise distance between our wrists. It feels like a blueprint of a room I have not yet dared to draw. He measured the distance, too. He made a note of it the way men make notes of debts. Not to collect, to remember the price of forgetting. Go, he says at last, and steps back first, a gesture so minor and so deliberate, the air around us remembers how to be air. I nod to Paolo on my way out. He is checking the south stairwell as if it were a friend late to a meeting. You'll have company crossing the lot, he says. Wind plays tricks with doors. I know that trick, I say. You and the wind, he answers, and I cannot tell if he is amused or fond. Both of you prefer honest hinges. Outside, the rain is a meticulous accountant, itemizing the skin. I keep my bag close and the compass closer. The path to the car is a slalom of puddles that want to call themselves something grander. I do not look back. In the apartment, I peel off the day like a costume that performed earnestly and deserves applause. I drape my wet blouse over the radiator and am briefly forgiven for all my earlier blasphemies against its music. I set the compass on the table and flip the lid and watch the needle settle again. Insistent. Tireless. I tell myself that tomorrow is about stone and steel and the mathematics of forgiveness. I tell myself the compass is a tool the way a ring is a circle. I tell myself I am the one steering. In the mirror above my desk, stormlight makes a narrow theater of my face. I look like a woman who has made a map and then noticed it was a portrait. I look like someone who might once allow herself to be found. I turn out the lamp. The city folds itself carefully. The sea drags its long attention along the coast and does not forget us. Somewhere in the dark, a generator coughs and then remembers how to breathe. I lie down and listen to the hotel move inside my mind. Timber settling, tarps whispering, scaffolds negotiating with their joints. I fall asleep with the sense that the building has leaned toward me, just enough. Like a patient who has decided to trust the hands that will hurt and heal in the same hour. The compass keeps its vigil, patient, and indecently sure. And if, in the middle of the night, the needle stirs toward a north that is not cardinal but human, I do not see it. Or I see it and call it weather. Or I name it by its proper architectural term, load, transferred quietly from one point to another, so that nothing buckles until the design decides it is time. Lightning writes something obscene across the horizon. The lights gutter and hold. Somewhere deeper in the hotel, a door slams the way abandoned places slam, with a memory of who last left and what they took. We part with good sense. The storm is not interested in our restraint. When I reach my apartment, the city is a wet ribbon. I peel off my soaked clothes and stand at the window, a towel around my shoulders, and consider the compass. I open the lid, and the needle begins its small, furious dance before deciding on the truth again. North, it says, as if that ever helps. Days gather into a rhythm. Sight, plans, meetings punctuated by the particular quiet that settles when he enters a room, and everyone's spine accidentally aligns. He is not cruel with the workers. He is exacting, which is different and sometimes worse. Men crave his approval in a way that makes them work safer, cleaner, faster. I let my suspicion sit beside my admiration like two cats who refuse to admit they've begun to share a sunspot. Paolo's presence becomes part of the architecture. Corners notice him first. Mornings, he materializes at the security table with a thermos and a ledger of his own. Columns of arrivals and exits, the arithmetic of safety. He nods at me, as if we are keeping a promise neither of us remembers making. Any needs today, signorina? He asks. Only the truth, I say, and he huffs the way men huff when a thing cannot be ordered in bulk. The hotel settles as crews peel back its disguises. Walls confess to previous owners, to impulsive renovations done in half-light. A narrow draft moves through a service corridor that refuses to appear on any drawing. When I stand there, the compass forgets itself, its needle jittering like a pupil before an exam. I close the lid and tell myself the metal is flirting with the wiring. It felt like a breath from a room that hadn't learned how to exhale. At my desk in the site office, one good lamp, a bruised table that used to be gentle, I sort invoices. Numbers don't lie. They only misdirect. Someone has been paying for storage space that no longer exists. Someone else has marked a door sealed in a handwriting that does not belong to a contractor. My pencil breaks. I hear my mentor's voice. Marble remembers everything buried beneath it, Isabella. Your job is not to deny the past. It is to hold it accountable to the light. I go looking for a new pencil, and instead find a question. It is Thursday, the kind that has been too long inside a human body. The afternoon pretends to be harmless. I follow the draft into a flight of service steps that take themselves too seriously. At the bottom, a corridor. Tape, casual. A sign, inventory, written as if the hand had already decided not to care. My key scrapes at a lock that was never properly locked. The bolt is theatrical. Dust blooms up like applause. Inside, the old air of paper and linen and the shadow of someone's carefulness. A low shelf, a file cabinet that would rather not be asked to tell the truth today, and, half hidden by a folded tarp, their weight announces them before my eyes do. Ledgers. The big kind, bound like gilt. Leather scabbed with time. My forearm is already gray with plaster. I leave a clean fingerprint on the leather as I lift the first book. The pages know how to keep secrets, but numbers are a species of honesty. You can launder them. You cannot teach them to lie without leaving a watermark. Names I recognize only because newspapers once cared about them. Dates that map neatly onto 3. Years when La Rosa Nera hosted private clubs and exclusive evenings, shipments, balances, debts, collected with interest and the sort of punctuation you hire men in hallways to supply. The hotel groans above me, old timbers remembering winters. I stand there with the book's spine digging into my palm, and the old oxygen of fear trying to find my lungs. I am not naive. Milan is not naive. The coast has never been naive. But it is one thing to live beside rumors, and another to open a door and hear them cease being rumor. I read entries aloud to the dead air, because I want the vowels to be witnesses. Amounts, initials, an occasional full surname that thought itself invincible, a note margin. Move dinner to East Salon. Avoid cameras. Settle with tea. The tea has been erased hard enough to wound the paper. My childhood hallway arrives without knocking. The angle that funneled smoke, the towel under the door, Nero's hiss. A corridor almost kept us. I have spent my life moving walls so that no one is cornered by a building. Now here I am, cornered by a ledger that wants a confession from a woman who didn't commit the crime. Signorina. Paolo's voice rides the acoustics from the stairwell. I start. Shut the book like it has bitten me. Here, I call, surprised at the steadiness of my mouth. His steps come nearer, considerate of the dust. He looms in the doorway and does not cross it. You shouldn't be alone down here. I wasn't alone, I say. Just outnumbered by choices. His eyes flick to the books, then back to my face. He does not ask. Need a light? No, I say, though I do. He nods once and withdraws. He left me with my decision because the kindest men sometimes know that rescue is a form of theft. I take one ledger, the heaviest, because I am tired of delicate sins. Upstairs, late sun breaks itself on the scaffolding and goes home in pieces. I sit with the book in the temporary office and draw a rectangle on my notepad labeled History, and another labeled Design, and a thin line between them labeled Conscience. I look at the line until it looks like a wire, and then like a fuse. If I leave, the story ends tidy. Tidy is a seduction. It saves time, prevents stains, tells people you are serious. But tidy has never built anything worth standing under. If I stay, they will call it consent. They will use my plans to launder memory. Or, if I stay, I can teach the stones a new grammar, one that refuses to conjugate violence in the present tense. Who gave me the right to believe architecture can absolve what men chose? I see the chapel again. The way we cut the skylights so morning would arrive like a benediction. I remember sitting on the floor the night before it opened and bargaining with a god I keep at a professional distance. If you're here, I'm trying. Light is a stubborn substance. It refuses to baptize what will not let itself be seen. I stand up fast enough to make the chair scold the floor. If I am to be complicit, it will at least be in the open. When I find him, he is in the ballroom giving a man in a cherry picker the sort of attention most men reserve for lovers or racehorses. He points at nothing, and the nothing reorganizes itself to please him. Dust makes a crown of the light above his head and pretends it is accidental. I hold the ledger out. He takes it without touching me. He flips a page and another. His face does not change. Explain, I say. Old business, he says quietly. There is kindness in his voice that shouldn't be there. Old sins, not mine. You own it. I own its future. He closes the book gently, like a priest with a missal. This is not what we are building. Then what is it? I hear the tremor I've been denying and want to swallow it back into my throat. A monument you can stand in front of and call atonement? A new shape for old money? His mouth moves, not a smile. A thought about a smile. He does not step closer. He removes the need. Isabella, he says. And my name is a steadying hand this time. If you want to walk away, I will not stop you. If I walk away, it's an admission, I say, surprising myself. If I stay, it looks like consent. If you stay, he murmurs, it is because your work can transfigure stone, and because you are the only person I trust to draw a line straight enough to be believed. The room rearranges around the sentence. It is a manipulation, and something like respect. It is the kind of sentence a man who learned power at the dinner table says when he has decided you are not made of paper. I stare at him until both of us have to blink. He reaches past me, careful not to touch, and lifts a roll of my drawings. His thumb anchors the vellum. He scans not for beams or spans, but for habits. You design walls that pretend they're doors, he says finally, not unkind, and doors that apologize for being exits. You draw the possibility of escape into rooms that have no intention of letting people go. Heat climbs my cheeks like ivy. You asked for truth, he adds softer, and then you built a place for it to stand. I built clarity, I say. Clarity is just truth with better manners, he answers, and the corners of his mouth consider their options. I want to be angry, but the anger is shy. You're using me. I'm employing you, he says. The difference is the door you leave through when we are finished. And how will I know which door it is? You'll decide it, he says, which is why I chose you. He said choose when he meant control, and I heard control and wanted to mishear it as care. Dust settles on his sleeve. He does not brush it off. Somewhere high above us, the cherry picker hums and stops. The man in its basket pretends not to exist. Paulo stands at the far entrance, responsible for the event of a doorway. If I falter, he will translate. If I fall, he will categorize the fall as a problem with the floor. What do you want this building to confess? I ask. That it can be more than what it remembers, he says. The rest is bookkeeping. You put your sins in the ledger, I say, tapping the cover with a finger I wish were less articulate. My father put his, he says. I chose to keep the book open. Honesty by inheritance, I say. How modern, or merely practical, he answers. You cannot redeem what you refuse to own. A muscle jumps in my jaw, bored with my restraint. He watches it, as if it were telling him something more useful than my words. The space between us narrows to the width of a decision. You're asking me to draw mercy the world will believe, I say, with stone, with light, while the ink is still wet. I'm asking you to build something beautiful enough to be true, he says. I don't build truth, I say. I build rooms that hold it without cracking. And I, he says, will learn to stand in them. The sentence does something unhelpful to my breath. I hate him for a moment for making promise sound like posture. I hate myself for hearing hope in the math of his voice. Finish it, he says at last, more gently than the grammar requires. And then, if you still want to leave, I'll open the door myself. Will you stand on the threshold and make a study of the leaving? I ask. I will stand where you ask me to, he says, and my sternum remembers how to ache. He was not asking for permission to touch me. He was rehearsing permission to be forgiven. Outside the ballroom, the corridor inhales enough quiet to be kind. I pass Paolo, who regards me with the professional concern of a man who owns several pairs of unremarkable shoes and knows that none of them squeak. "You good?" he asks, which is his word for armed. "Hungry? Safe?" "I have work," I say. He accepts that as an answer and not an escape. Evening brings the kind of rain that seems to know your name. I take the hill on foot because I need the inconvenience. The compass thuds once against my hip, chastening. Headlights rake the street. A car idles at the corner too long to be forgetful. Paolo's sedan. He lifts a hand barely off the wheel. I nod. He stays. The fact of him sits under the weather and does not rust. My rented room remembers me with its one good lamp and its bed that counts the springs aloud. I switch on the light and the room gentles around me. There, on my pillow, a strip of red velvet, narrow as a ribbon, soft as an apology, the exact color of the cord that guards VIP sections from ordinary people with ordinary lives. Sit on the edge of the bed and look at it until looking becomes a form of touching. Threat, signature, invitation. It smells faintly of nothing, which is how expensive things refuse to confess their origin. I lift it. It refuses to weigh anything. In the reflection on the window, my face looks like a woman considering whether to forgive herself in advance. He had opened a door not to a room but to a question. He was asking whether I would decorate it or change the hinges. I set the velvet beside the compass and watch the two of them pretend not to know each other. The inscription hides patiently beneath the lid, polite as a reprimand, so you never lose your way. What if it's not the way I'm worried about? I tell the room. But the walls? The city loosens its shoulders. The rain becomes administrative. I draw a line on my pad labeled exit and decide not to take it, yet. When I lie down, I do not sleep. I settle. The difference is important. Sleep forgets. Settling remembers. Somewhere in the darkness, the hotel turns in its long bed and tests the strength of its new promises. The ledger waits where I left it. Closed but not done. The ribbon keeps its counsel. The compass does what it always does. Points, not toward mercy or judgment, but toward whatever will be hardest to deny in the morning. And I, who have taught rooms to forgive, try to remember what it cost to forgive a man. A faint wrongness threads the morning. A note gone flat in a familiar song. Paolo arrives earlier than the sun has any right to require. Thermos unopened, jaw set in a way that edits small talk out of the script. Down by the loading bay, a black sedan idles, departs, returns. It behaves like an idea that keeps arguing with itself. A crate meant for the kitchens appears at the west wing and insists it has always belonged there. Even the gulls are theatrical, announcing weather that has not yet been appointed. Leo studies the water, the way men study ledgers, looking for the column that lies. "Leave early," he says. Not quite to me, not quite to the tide. "The water's wrong today. Water has a memory," I answer. It returns to its habits. He nods as if habits and debts are cousins. Exactly. In the office, a white envelope waits on the blotter. No stamp, no sender, handwriting that would rather not be recognized. Inside, an index card. You restore what should stay buried. The ink has a fingerprint in it. I slide the card beneath the blotter, and the blotter pretends it did not feel the pulse. By noon, the sky has that precise metallic taste that tells honest people to go home. Crews tidy their edges. Clipboards discover urgency. Paolo stations 2 men at the south stairwell and calls it a drill, because names calm the uncalmable. I go back to the place where the atrium opens like an unfinished question. Leo walks the scaffolding beside me with the modesty of someone who could make a scene and doesn't. At a gap in the subfloor, his sleeve grazes my wrist as he steadies me. I memorize the contact like a measurement I will need later, and tell myself it is inappropriate to memorize a sleeve. Twilight puts its teeth in the horizon and worries at it. I do not resign. I go to work. I let him walk me through the grid of temporary rails and held breath. We speak in small nouns, beam, span, load, as if small words could armor a large evening. When men come to break things, they come quickly. After the crews have gone, the hotel breathes dust in shallow pulls. a lung rehearsing restraint. I am alone with a handful of lights that believe themselves more courageous than they are. The first sound is not sound, but a decision happening in the next room. Then boots. Then that careful, manufactured silence men carry with them when they have brought something they don't want argued. The bulbs stutter like small hearts. Air tightens between wall and wall until it's a wire. A door yields in the particular way doors do when persuasion has been applied. Fear tunes the body. Radiator, window, the beam my hip remembers. I inventory exits the way a devout woman inventories prayers. 2 shadows become 3. The third becomes intent before the second can finish becoming. A hand closes around my arm. A voice says my name wrong, as if the vowels owed it money. I do not run. Running is a door you can't always find again. Then the room shifts, subtly, like weather right before it admits itself. And Leo is there where he should not be, between me and the future those boots intend. The space shrinks to consequence. What follows is not cinematic. It is the flat grammar of practiced harm. I note angles instead of impacts, choices instead of contact. A shoulder re-aimed, a breath held. The specific hush a man makes just before he decides not to listen to mercy. Something metal coughs in a corner. Dust performs a small miracle and hangs, undecided. A body drops. The floor remembers it. A pipe somewhere begins to weep. Smoke smells like a church that has decided against forgiveness. No sirens yet. Time has not granted them permission. Heat climbs my wrists. Leo's blood is warmer than mine. My hands find it because they were always going to. The world narrows to iron and pulse. My sight edits itself to the hinge of his mouth shaping my name. Look at me, he says, and I do. Because there is nowhere else my eyes belong. His hand is on my shoulder, or mine is on his, and breath becomes the one instruction the body can still follow. You're safe. It isn't true. The sentence nonetheless opens a window in the long corridor where panic keeps boxes. I press fabric to his side, and only then notice what my hand has chosen. The red velvet strip. The color makes a scandal of the stain. He gives a broken sound, almost laughter, almost a curse. Of course it is velvet. Voices arrive with discipline. Paolo exists at once, the way doors exist when you need them to. Radio static bites consonants out of Italian. South stair clear, generator, lights 1 and 2, he says, giving the world back its verbs. Sirens begin to thread themselves through salt. The sea pretends innocence, as seas do. Hospital, I say. Private, Leo says, and the word carries the particular efficiency of money that refuses to waste time. The hotel puts a draft on my neck, like a hand, and reminds me that we are all made of rooms that chose to stand. The car is a quiet the key. Storm can't quite enter. Paolo drives the way a lighthouse thinks, without hurry, without doubt. In the rear view, his eyes take attendance of every heartbeat. The road lifts and lowers its shoulders along the cliff. Rain salts our silence. I keep pressure where a doctor I haven't met yet will want pressure kept. Leo's composure is unshowy. He has the inconvenient skill of not alarming the person holding him together. He was counting costs he had already decided to pay. I could feel the arithmetic in the corner of his jaw. The villa behaves like myth when it needs to. Tonight it remembers candles. We cross stone that has never been cheap. A doctor materializes as if the house had simply reached into a cabinet and selected him. He is brisk and expensive. Reassurance hangs off his coat like a forgotten scarf. The word he uses for the wound is clean, as if blood obeyed hygiene. Lucky, he says, and the syllables make an unwise pilgrimage across the room to land at my feet. Leo glances at me as if luck answered to me personally. I busy my hands with gauze, with packets labeled in a language that expects to be obeyed. The velvet ribbon hides under the corner of a tray. A soft private witness. Power flutters, remembers itself. Rain speaks in sentences across the tall glass. Someone leaves tea and does not stay to be thanked. The generator decides to earn its keep. The doctor writes in a hand that looks like a verdict softened for household use, and leaves us inside the chamber music of storm and breath. We are too tired to pretend. His ruined shirt gives up in threads. I help him peel it away, practical intimacy that feels like sacrilege. When fabric sticks, he inhales. When it frees, he closes his eyes in a privacy I don't interrupt. He sits, not slumped but arranged, a man practiced at bleeding without performance. The candles turn the room into an older century, one that spoke in oaths. There were 3, I say, because arithmetic is the only honesty that doesn't wobble. 4, he answers. One decided he'd rather live. Because of Paolo? Because of mathematics. His mouth almost smiles and then thinks better of it. The bandage asks to be exact and I oblige. My hands remember other materials. Plaster, linen, walnut, and handle skin as if it were a facade the weather had bullied. I avoid cataloging the shape of him. Shapes become buildings when my attention lingers. I fasten the last strip and the architecture of the body exhales. You don't have to be brave, he says, and the gentleness in it is an instrument I don't know how to play. I don't know how not to be, I admit, and the truth makes the air more useful. Today was meant for me, he adds, eyes on the far wall that has no guilt to confess. The building is innocent. For now, I say, because I am tired of furniture pretending to be neutral. I found a note, I tell him. In the office. He lets the silence hold it, then. And you? I put it under the blotter like a child hides a broken thing, I say. Then I went to work. He looks at my hands. Of course you did. He admired the part of me that refuses to be rearranged. He was deciding whether that part could survive in rooms he owns. We listen to the rain fail and succeed against glass. The compass on the side table has its lid open, impolite. The needle vibrates as if the storm were a question it knows the answer to. Leo follows my gaze. It belonged to my mother before it belonged to me, he says. I thought that I needed direction? I offer. That you would keep it honest, he corrects. And the sincerity in it makes a small, private wreck of me. Tell me one true thing, I say. Because bargains like to be specific. I do not believe in absolution, he says. Only in accounts kept accurately and paid if they can be. Then why call me? I ask. Why build a chapel into a hotel? Because I have seen what you do with light, he says, and something stalwart in me leans toward the kindness, and then leans back, wary of soft edges on hard men. He tells me the history of the scar on his shoulder in 5 unadorned sentences that weigh more than ornament would. I trace the border once with a fingertip the way a cartographer honors a coastline and refuses to add monsters. He holds the back of my neck briefly. Not ownership, not pity. A benediction a man like him is not supposed to know how to give. It rearranges 3 rooms of my past and then gently returns them. Why were you there so quickly? I ask. He studies the window where the storm writes and erases. Because you were, he says. And then, as if the truth owes interest. Because men I pay to know things told me it would be a mistake to be late. So fate is payroll and timing, I say. Fate, he answers, is not losing what isn't replaceable. We sit with the difficult grace of that. Somewhere in the house, a gate complains and is forgiven. Exhaustion escorts my defenses to the door and waits while they find their shoes. I do not take the guest room with its apologetic linen. I take the chair near him and let the candles read my face until they have memorized it. When the wind leans hard on the glass, his fingers startle. Without ceremony, I cover his hand with mine. The contact is not a vow. It is a treaty, negotiated softly, held only for the duration of weather. Dawn negotiates the storm into memory. The doctor returns like a reprieve and leaves like order restored. A woman whose name I do not learn presses coffee into my hands. I thank the cup because the woman will not let me thank her. In the bathroom mirror, I look like a person who has kept watch over a decision. My palms smell faintly of metal and him. Water does what it can. The scent retires to the edges and bides its time. When I step back into the room, the candles are small altars. He is awake and unperforming. We do not ruin the hour by naming it. I begin. He nods, as if finishing the sentence would be redundant. Paolo will take you, he says, not a command, simply a plan the day already recognizes. I close the compass and slip it into my bag. Not for direction, for memory. On the mantel, the velvet ribbon lies where I left it, tame and unrepentant. I fold it once, twice, and it becomes a line I could draw on a page to keep the paper honest. At the threshold I pause, not for drama but for accuracy. Outside, the sea rehearses its innocence. Inside, his breathing edits the silence into something less severe. There is a world waiting below the cliffs that expects me to resume my role in it. There is a part of me that already has. I'll send the revised atrium plan this afternoon, I say, because some tendernesses travel better in the clothes of work. He smiles with his eyes, economical as always. I'll read it where the light is kind. Paolo is a shape in the doorway, whole as a rule, quiet as duty. He inclines his head to me, to the morning, to the arrangement we are pretending not to describe. I step into the corridor. The house releases us with the courtesy of institutions that know they will be required again. The air outside is salt and apology. The road curls down toward the day. I do not promise anything to anyone. I open my palm and find a crescent of dried wax I didn't know I had kept. Evidence that a candle burned ardently here and then allowed itself to end. I do not go to the office. Not yet. The world can wait the width of one breath. On the drive down, the compass hums its small certainty against the lining of my bag. North, it insists, as if north were ever the point. I let the needle have its righteousness. Mine will come later, when paper and stone are ready to be told what to do. For now there is the cliff road, rinsed clean. For now there is the manageable labor of morning air entering, leaving. For now there is the knowledge that the day will require blueprints and scaffolds and the whole liturgy of competence, but only after the silence has had its say. I rest my forehead against the cool glass, count Paolo's steady breaths in the front seat, and let the sea count mine, not resignation, not yet work, a room between, where everything hard has a chair and everything tender, a door. A dress is a decision you make with your hands when your heart refuses to vote. I choose the one I can breathe in. Silk that remembers how bodies are meant to move, not how they are expected to pose. I pin my hair the way I do when I need to look like a verdict rather than a question. The mirror over the vanity is a polite liar. I ask it for accuracy and accept competence. On the table, lipstick, a clutch, the compass. The velvet ribbon lies folded like a scar that learned to behave. Morning has the transparent look of glass that has just been wiped and wants to be thanked. I sleep in pieces and wake in fractions. The villa is quiet the way money knows how to be quiet. Footsteps edited out, doors that agree to be invisible. Leo is elsewhere, or performing elsewhere, or being performed, which is the same thing for certain men. Paolo appears at the appointed time like a sentence that ends as promised. Ready? He asks. As I'll ever be, I say, and slide the compass into the clutch. Not for direction, I tell myself, but for memory. The lid closes with a small, decisive kiss. The drive into the city is a rehearsal for something that will not change no matter how well rehearsed. Lights stack like notes. Traffic conducts itself in the manner of orchestras reluctant to admit they are orchestras at all. Paolo says nothing. Silence is the grammar he speaks best. At the palazzo, the evening has learned to be gold. Chandeliers hang like inverted constellations, the kind that require sponsorship. The floor is a chessboard that is never lost. Flowers remember how to faint gracefully. String music is happening to people who pretend not to notice. The air smells of good champagne, good perfume, good intentions that will congeal later into anecdotes. The gala does not care. Galas never do. They polish their floors and feed their guests, and hold a mirror up to power, so it can admire itself from a different angle. Cameras sigh. Men who learn to apologize in Latin kiss my cheeks dry. I move through the room the way architects move through new buildings, noting the load-bearing laughter, the ornamental compliments, the exits that mean it. The quartet saws at something elegant. The photographers saw at people. When they take my picture, I think of scaffolding. When they take his, the light decides to behave. Leo is magnetic in the way magnets are. He doesn't move. The world does. He wears a suit that has learned his posture, and the room collects around him politely. He sees me the way storms see capes, an awareness without admission. He does not come to me. He lets the evening deliver me in its own slow course, which is either caution or choreography. A journalist appears with a smile sharpened to look friendly. "Signorina," he says, "you gave La Rosa Nera its light back." "I didn't take it away," I say, and the smile stumbles. "Will you continue under the Moretti Foundation?" He asks, pen poised like a small spear. "I continue under my own name," I answer, and the question makes a note of itself in triplicate. A woman in a dress the color of minted money touches my arm with the intimacy of commerce. He discovered you, yes? She says. So refreshing, men with vision. Very Pygmalion, very modern. I want to tell her that I discovered myself with graphite and stubbornness and a childhood hallway that almost kept me, but I am tired of telling the truth to people who collect it like glass paperweights. I smile, which is the correct answer to the wrong question. Paulo hovers at the edge of things, the way lighthouses hover. Constant, bored by their own usefulness. He does not drink. He does not mingle. He supervises the weather. A toast is called for. The room pivots. Leo steps onto a small dais that the floor produces, as if it had been waiting for this moment to confess it was also a stage. A microphone understands its purpose. He says the expected words about heritage and renewal and the responsibilities of those who can. He names La Rosa Nera, and people applaud as if we have baptized a child and not a building. Then he names me. The architect who convinced stone to remember mercy, he says. A murmur. Heads tilt toward me with the weightless generosity of people who are not required to risk anything. His eyes find mine and for a moment do not move. In that moment lives a quiet I will think about months later when I try to itemize the cost of this night. Then he looks away, and the quiet becomes a bill I cannot pay yet. I tell myself this is fine. We are professionals inside a ritual that pretends to be about gratitude. I tell myself that the room is too bright for sincerity. I tell myself that if you love a building, you do not ask it to confess in public. The bathrooms are oasis, rumor, refuge. Women always find out in bathrooms because bathrooms are where performance takes a breath. Powder, laughter, the small violence of heels freed from their leashes. Two PR girls adjust each other's lies in the mirror, voices bright with gossip that wears evening gloves. He discovered her, one says, tugging at the corner of a smile with a pencil. Placed her perfectly. He's very good at placement. Contracts, clients, the other sings back, dabbing at a lipstick that looks like a well-funded threat. Very Pygmalion, very modern. They say my name like it's a brand, and then Leo's like it's a warning on a cigarette packet. They do not notice me because women who look like decisions are often misfiled under already decided. They leave in a small storm of scent and laughter, and the room exhales. The compass in my bag weighs what betrayal weighs. It has been growing heavier for weeks, perhaps years, perhaps since a child learned that corridors sometimes prefer to keep people. I do not remember deciding to drop it. Only the bright sound it makes against marble as if someone has taught a star to break. It spins like indignation, and then steadies with indecent confidence. North, it says, as if that ever helps. I pick it up, place it back in the clutch, and discover I have acquired a second pulse. My mouth tastes like salt and pennies, the currency of women who have run out of elegance. The corridor outside is a half-light, where chandeliers go to exhale. Laughter drifts like a careless boat from the main room. The strings are playing something French and accomplished. The air is cooler here, less convinced of itself. He is already there. Of course he is. Men like him arrive at the moment before you and make it a habit. He says my name. It lands properly, as it always does, and somehow that makes everything worse. You wanted to see if I could survive your world, I tell him. My voice is not loud. It is precise. You never thought I'd walk out of it. There are many kinds of silence. This one is a gate closing across a road I did not know I would someday need. He does not reach for me. He does not confess. He does not deny. The denial would have been kinder. The confession would have been interesting. Instead, he does the thing men do when they have built themselves into their roles too carefully to know how to step sideways. He holds still. I never lied to you, he says finally. And the sentence behaves as if it were a virtue, about who I am. No, I agree. You lied about who I was to you. His mouth is almost a smile, and then it remembers the cost. I told them you rebuilt light, he says. I told them they were fortunate to stand under it. You told them you discovered me, I say, and the word discover has edges I hadn't noticed before. As if I were a continent, and you an appetite. That is not, he begins, and stops, because he is intelligent enough not to say what I meant was to a woman holding a broken star in a small bag. Placement, I say. Contracts, clients, very Pygmalion, very modern. The corridor has excellent acoustics. Even my contempt sounds elegant. He closes his eyes for a moment. the way men do when they are calculating how much truth the moment can carry without breaking. When he opens them, something gentler stands there and refuses to leave. "I am trying," he says, "and I am not quick at it." "I know," I say, "and that is the problem I cannot lift. I am not slow enough to be what you need me to be while you learn." I think of the attack, the velvet ribbon reddening, the way his hand found the back of my neck like a benediction he never learned but somehow remembered. I think of the doctor calling the wound clean, and me understanding that cleanliness and innocence are cousins who stopped speaking years ago. I think of the compass pointing where it points. "Regardless, walk away," he says very softly, like a man telling his favorite animal to bite him and live. "I am," I answer, and the future revises itself by a degree that will be a continent in a year. Behind us, cameras applaud nothing in particular. In front of us, the corridor decides to grow longer than it is. Paolo is somewhere that can be reached by duty, but not by desire. He does not touch me. I do not look back. The dress performs the act of walking with a dignity I do not have energy to argue with. A server steps aside because grief has right of way in any language. Someone calls my name and the syllables trip over their own hope. When the doors open, night has kept its promise to be night. The air outside is cool with the kind of honesty only air can afford. The city holds its breath. The sea can be heard rehearsing its innocence a mile away. The camera bulbs behind me go off like fireworks at a funeral. In the car, the compass vibrates against the lining of the clutch as if to say, "I told you." I touch the lid and it behaves. Paolo does not ask if I am all right. He drives. The palazzo recedes, its constellations turned upside down, the mirror it held up to power folding neatly into itself. I lean my head against the window and watch the city's face pass over mine and forget it. In the apartment, I unpin the decision from my hair and let the verdict fall to the floor. I place the compass on the table and the velvet ribbon beside it, red as the kind of invitation people mistake for kindness. I wash my face and find I'm still in it. I stand a long time at the window, while the night practices not making promises. Tomorrow there will be messages and statements, and the ordinary theater of aftermath. Tomorrow, people will want to know whether I am continuing under the Moretti Foundation, and in what capacity, and with what grace. Tomorrow the hotel will stand where it stands, exhaling dust that remembers more than it should. Tonight, there is only the quiet that comes when something you love stops pretending to be safe. I turn the compass so the inscription faces down. Not everything needs to be read in this light. I fold the ribbon once, twice, until it is merely a line. The kind you draw on a plan to remind yourself where not to build again. When sleep comes, it does not apologize for being late. It brings no absolution. It brings only rest, which is different, and for now, enough. And in the morning, when the world has not ended, as it never does, I will decide where to place the first stone that belongs only to me. After, a crash of consequences. The city learns to pronounce our ruin fluently. La Rosa Nera burns in headlines as if fire were contagious from truth to print. Slow-motion footage loops on television while anchors with immaculate hair arrange their faces around phrases like irregularities and ongoing investigations. Men whose suits are their alibis sit on sets lit like confessions and let their eyes do math. A drone shows the hotel from above, the way vultures see love letters. People text me versions of "Are you okay?" that mean "Are you involved?" I answer no to both because grammar fails in emergencies. I go to my drafting table and rehearse forgetting. I tell myself forgetting is an architecture too, if you are patient. It is not. It is demolition disguised as grace. Paolo is the first to knock when everyone else is pretending to be surprised. He looks like a sentence that has decided to be brief. He carries a thick, ugly envelope with the kind of string that insists on being tied twice. He sets it down like it weighs an apology. "From storage," he says. "The old storage. Before my time and not by much. Who asked you to bring it?" "Your work did," he answers, because his loyalty is a geometry I have learned not to argue with. "Read it. Or don't. But know it exists." I open the envelope after he leaves because courage is better alone. Inside, blueprints in duplicate, the paper stiff with age, and the certainty of men who thought secrets had better penmanship. The patriarch's mark appears where it shouldn't, initials in a red pencil that bled like temper. The margins whisper, "Reduce supports, Conceal material. Costs prefer silence. Orders written like prayers only the wrong God would answer. The sabotage is there in the bones. The fault is old. The frame was already crooked when we met. My hands learn a new kind of shaking. Not fear, alignment. The satisfaction of a theory finding its proof with terrible, elegant inevitability. I do not owe him salvation. I am not a saint. I am a woman who has learned that men will mistake forgiveness for permission and call it love. Still, I bring the pages to the only people who will listen, not because of him, but because stone should remember truth when men forget it. The world does what it always does when beauty becomes inconvenient. It looks away, politely. Editors demote the story below sports. Commentators change their adjectives. Scandal is a hungry animal. Once fed, it sleeps. In sleep, it forgets names. Weeks pass. The papers stop printing his. The sea takes back what the fire left behind. I return to rooms that behave, to lines that submit to reason, to measurements that do not ask questions. Yet when the graphite catches the light, I see red instead of silver. At night, I dream of La Rosa Nera breathing underwater, its chandeliers swaying like drowned constellations. Somewhere in the dark, a compass turns, stubborn, golden, faithful. I wake with north in my mouth like a taste I did not order. I tell myself I'm free. But some silences hold on the way velvet holds scent, quietly, completely, forever. Investigation is just grief that insists on evidence. The archives in the municipal building keep their own weather. Dust lives here the way plants live in courtyards, by habit and sunlight and stubbornness. A clerk with the posture of retired authority escorts me to a table that would prefer to be touched by someone more official. I apologize to it with my fingertips and promise to be careful. Page after page, decade after decade. Permits stamped with dates that pretend accuracy. Revised plans with margins that look like they have been argued with. Signatures that try to pass for consent. I draw overlays on tracing paper the way surgeons plan mercy. The patriarch's handwriting is easy to love if you don't know Italian. Decisive loops. The confidence of men who build without asking the soil its opinion. A note in the red pencil. Remove 3 columns. False load bearing. Replace with appearances. I include the word appearances in my notebook and double it. I circle it the way a child circles a word it suspects might be magic. The elderly secretary agrees to tea in a cafe that smells of orange peel and newspapers. Her scarf is the color of a faded sunset, and the nod is a memory her hands remember better than her mind does. He liked to write in the margins, she says without prompting, as if she has been waiting for someone to ask for years and today is a reprieve. Always red. He said black is for men who plan to be blamed. And he planned not to be? He planned not to be interrupted, she says, and looks out the window as if the street might apologize for not being glamorous enough to deserve the memory. The retired engineer meets me at a favorite bench because pride survives longer in open air. He brings a folded plan like contraband. He taps a finger against the spine of the paper until it surrenders. I told them, he says. The way men say, I told you so when they are tired of being right in empty rooms. You can make a building look rich by starving it in its bones. It will stand long enough to congratulate you. What happened when you told them? I learned to be less eloquent, he says, and his eyes water for a reason that does not request sympathy. We put the red pencil margins beside the official blue lines. The conversation that unfolds across decades is fluent in omission. I have never hated talent so efficiently. In the bank's safe deposit room, A. Refrigerated reliquary for wealth. I trade my dignity for a visitor's badge and wait under lighting that. Photographs guilt as a skin condition. Paolo stands behind me, not as menace but as punctuation. The box appears like a conjuring trick that requires paperwork. Inside, a ledger with sober posture, a photograph of the patriarch beside a model of the hotel, the caption in neat type. Vision requires courage. I think of the columns that were never allowed to exist, the way they would have held up more than a ceiling. At night, the compass ticks faintly in the drawer, as if time were a creature with small teeth. I open the lid and it behaves. The needle quivers, decides, returns to its certainty. I envy it. People mistake certainty for honesty. It is only stamina. The moral crossroads is not a crossroads. It is a landing between 2 flights of stairs, and both directions lead to rooms you do not want to explain later. If I hand over what I found, they will say I did it for him. If I don't, I will have to move through every room I ever build with the knowledge that I let a structure pretend not to know its own history. I do not want to absolve him. I want to absolve the building. I draft at night, overlay on overlay, the new plan honest about weight where the old one lied. I add notes in pencil the way a priest adds names to the prayers of the faithful. Reinstate support, interrupt ornament, confess load path. I talk to the paper until it listens. Paolo returns with a message he delivers to the floor between us. From him, he says. Not an ask. I read it alone because the dignity of a man in custody is a fragile object and does not enjoy witnesses. It is not a letter. It is a sentence. Make the building honest. He does not ask for help. He does not say, save me. He does not say I am innocent or I am guilty or forgive me or forget me. He uses the only grammar I have ever trusted from him, imperatives that aim outward. I look at the compass until my eyes stop pretending not to water. Make the building honest. It is both request and absolution. It is neither. It is a plan. In the window of my studio, the city arranges itself into its evening geometry. I kneel on the floor with the old plans and the new, an altar of paper and graphite. I draw the truth in. Where a column should have been, I lay one down. Where a beam lied about its direction, I correct it. I leave some wounds visible because beauty that denies its scars is only decor. The printer in the corner coughs out copies like contrition. I stack them the way clerks stack miracles, neatly, in triplicate. Delivering evidence is less dramatic than anyone hopes. There are just doors, names on doors, clerks who file sorrow alphabetically, people who shake your hand like an event has occurred and must be acknowledged with fingers. A prosecutor accepts my folder with the amiable suspicion of men who have been disappointed by narratives before. He asks why I am doing this if my contract is over, if I have no stake. I answer with a polite version of because I am trying to invent a version of myself I can live with, and he nods as if I have said civic duty, which is the same thing, translated into office. A journalist I trust, not because he is noble, but because he is lazy in a way that keeps him from inventing. Reads the copies and whistles once. A lonely sound, like a bird trying to remember its reason. You'll get your name in there, he says, tapping the column inches like a fortune teller. Second day, page 4. Third day, I say. Brief, he considers. You're probably right. And so it is. A small article that uses the word exculpatory, because some words prefer ink to air. My name appears for 2 breaths, and then the news turns toward other appetites. The world is efficient in its forgetting. Sometimes I admire it. The legal things I am not invited to attend grind on. The way millstones do what they do whether grain is in them or not. I am told nothing. I ask no one. The days practice being ordinary and get better at it. The sea takes back what the fire left behind. On a wet morning, the demolition cranes become choreography. They move with the tenderness of large animals asked to perform grace. The facade sighs into itself. The atrium, ever theatrical, bows. Dust rises and lays its body down over the neighborhood like an old story getting comfortable. I watch from a distance with the others who once called the building theirs. Neighbors. Former staff. A woman who sells postcards of things that don't exist anymore. We do not applaud. Loss does not enjoy audiences. In the studio, I put the new plan on the wall where the old one used to be. The lines do not argue, they hold. My pencil leaves silver instead of red. Some afternoons I forget and see red anyway. At night I dream less of drowning and more of breath. In one dream the chandeliers are still underwater, but they have learned to be fish. In another the compass spins, not in confusion but in joy, like a dancer who has finally found a floor that does not complain. There are small aftermaths inside the larger one. A letter with the foundation's crest arrives with the humility of couriered things. It contains no money, which I respect, and a sentence, which I accept. Your plans will be preserved in the city archive. Bureaucracy's version of a thank you. I put the letter in a drawer with the dried flour from a job I never liked, and a key to a place that probably no longer exists. Paolo meets me on a bench that has learned to be ours, though we never said so. He sits the way good men sit when everything they are loyal to has learned to stand without them. Did you go? I ask, meaning the court, meaning the jail, meaning anywhere he might have had permission to translate. I don't visit rooms that keep the living from their wind, he says. But I sent food that tastes like home. Thank you, I say. He nods, which is Paolo for you're welcome, and don't ruin it by talking too much. He tells me one thing, and only one. There was a hearing. A judge said words that sounded like the beginning of patience. Counsel mentioned structural sabotage with the confidence of men who like having documents. He does not tell me anything about hope, because that is not his business, and should not be mine. On my walk back, I stop by the fence where the hotel used to be, and imagine foundation stones set honestly this time. I imagine a future that does not require denial to be pretty. I imagine the atrium as a room that chooses not to perform. I go home. I draw a small square in my notebook and label it quiet. I leave the square empty. The day the sea is more green than blue, I wake with the honest ache that follows a long illness you forgot you had. There is work to do, other buildings, other stubborn rooms, the ordinary heroism of measurements. I make coffee that forgives the cup for being chipped. I place the compass on the table and turn it so the inscription faces me. So you never lose your way. Direction is not destination, but it helps with mornings. I think of him less. When I do, it is like remembering a weather that taught me something about windows. I open the drawer with the velvet ribbon and take it out for the first time in weeks. The scent has faded to the suggestion of a memory. The red is the red of the inside of a closed eye. I fold it once, twice, the way you fold a map when the road ahead is not a place you need instructions for. I put it back gently because some artifacts demand curation. A request lands in my inbox from a monastery that learned the hard way what water does to stone. Another from a school that wants more light and less heat. I accept both, because restoring what is willing to be honest is a profession with uses. At dusk, I walk to the water's edge where the city allows itself to be imprecise. I look toward the absence where the hotel once rehearsed its grandeur. In my mind, I lay columns where they belong, beams where they tell the truth. In my mind, light behaves. I am not waiting for him. I am not waiting. I am keeping the room between those sentences clean. On the way home, I pass a newsstand. The paper offers wars and weather and the scores of men who require scoring. No one's name I know is printed in large type. I buy a magazine for its picture of a house with windows too large to be humble. I will mark it up later with the kindness of a critic who has repaired things that wanted to collapse. In the apartment, I set the compass beside my glass of water and watch the needle remember itself after every small vibration the city gives it. I think of the first line I ever drew that felt like faith. I think of the last line I drew for La Rosa Nera, the one that told the truth about what had been stolen and how it could be returned. I tell myself I'm free. The sentence does not feel like a curtain call. It feels like a door I have finally remembered how to use. Night arrives on schedule. The radiator mutters its homilies. The city's breath evens out. I turn the compass lid closed with 2 fingers, and for once, it doesn't feel like refusing guidance. It feels like choosing rest. Sleep comes without apology. In the morning, the world will not have ended. It almost never does. The day will require paper and patience and the quiet courage of measurements. I will give it those. And if, as I walk out, my hand hovers a moment over a drawer where velvet keeps its counsel, that too will be a kind of prayer. The kind that does not ask for absolution, only accuracy. Somewhere offshore, a buoy rings in weather that has decided to behave. The needle holds, the line holds, the woman holds, and the next stone I place will belong only to the truth. Months unfold like blueprints left in the rain, faded at the edges but still legible if you know what you were building. La Rosa Nera rises from its ashes, not with fanfare but with intent. Arches cleaned of memory, chandeliers rehung without their sins. The limestone gleams in a way that almost forgives what it once heard whispered through its bones. The Moretti name is gone. No plaques. No dedications, only mine. Isabella Hart, lead architect. Letters in brass, measured and balanced, etched into the facade like a breath held long enough to mean something. The reopening is quiet by design. No ribbon, no orchestra. Just the sea murmuring its approval and the soft hum of fresh linen being unfolded in sunlit rooms. I should feel victorious. Instead, I feel the strange hush that follows absolution. Too clean, too quiet, as if the air itself is waiting to be rewritten. I move through the halls alone, fingers brushing polished railings and walls that once trembled under the weight of chaos. Everything smells new, but somewhere beneath the varnish there's still that hint of salt and old paper, like the ghost of what we survived. I'm checking the entrance lighting, warm but not theatrical, when it happens. Not a sound. Not a shadow. A presence, the air shifts. Something in it learns my name. I turn. He stands in the open doorway. No suit, no empire hanging from his shoulders. Just a black shirt open at the throat, hands in his pockets, and that half smile he never once aimed at anyone else. Not power, not performance. Just Leo. The silence between us isn't awkward. It's fluent. We speak it like survivors who remember which parts of each other caught fire and which refused to burn. He breaks it first. It still smells of the sea, he says, and the sound of his voice rearranges the molecules in the room. It always will, I reply. Some things refuse to learn their lesson. He nods once. Good. Lessons ruin beauty. I almost laugh, but something softer takes its place, a kind of ache that knows its own name. My pulse answers before I do, stupid and loud in my throat. You still owe me a compass. His smile sharpens slightly, just enough to catch the light and return it with interest. I thought you'd stopped needing one. I haven't, I say. I just learned not to ask for directions. He steps forward, unhurried, like the sea reaching back up the shore for what it forgot to take the first time. The sound of his shoes on marble is a metronome for every heartbeat I've misplaced since the night everything ended. When he's close enough that his breath stirs a strand of hair at my temple. He doesn't touch me. He doesn't have to. He's there, and the air around him knows it, and so do I. He reaches into his pocket. For a brief, foolish moment, I think it's another compass. But what he pulls out is a folded scrap of blueprint, edges burned, corners stubbornly intact. This survived the fire, he says quietly. I didn't mean for it to. I take it without touching his hand. The ink has blurred where heat met humidity. My handwriting overlays his, the two of us still arguing in graphite. Everything that survives has its reasons, I whisper. He exhales through a smile too fragile to last. Maybe so. We stand like that for a long time, the silence expanding gently between us. Through the windows, the sea has gone the color of late forgiveness. The chandeliers sway slightly, catching echoes of a wind that doesn't reach this deep inside. I was never trying to steer you, he says finally. My laugh catches on a rib and stays there. You just built the road I didn't know I was walking. He looks at me then, fully, painfully, as though he's cataloging a language he used to be fluent in and is only now remembering the grammar of. His eyes are bluer than I remember. His restraint is a kind of tenderness. He lifts his hand like he might tuck that wild strand behind my ear, but then stops, fingers suspended mid-air, asking, permission, or maybe forgiveness. Maybe both. I don't move. Not forward, not back. I want to see if he remembers where north is without a compass this time. He drops his hand slowly, respectfully. Then, after a moment, I have something for you. From his other pocket, he draws out a small object wrapped in linen. He unwraps it as if unveiling a memory. A compass, identical to the first except the inscription. So you never forget your way back. My throat closes around everything I don't say. I trace the letters with one fingertip. That's not north. No, he murmurs. But it's direction enough. We walk together through the hall. The building listens. The marble carries our steps like it's been waiting for this rhythm to return. Paolo appears in the distance, clipboard in hand, pretending to check something. When he catches sight of Leo, he hesitates, then nods once, a benediction disguised as bureaucracy. Then he turns away, leaving us to the silence. The lobby's new glass doors open automatically at our approach, letting the sea air drift in, warm and salted and impossibly alive. Leo's gaze moves up to the brass letters on the facade. My name, newly polished. It suits you, he says. The building looks like it's breathing again. It was always meant to, I reply. It just needed honesty. His eyes flicker, understanding the echo. And what about you? I'm still under restoration. That earns the smallest smile, half amusement, half ache. He pockets his hands again, like a man trying not to disturb the equilibrium of a place that no longer belongs to him. Twilight clings to the windows. The sky is all lavender bruise and slow forgiveness. Behind us, La Rosa Nera glows like something holy that decided to give the world another chance. We stand there without speaking. The moment holds its breath and does not ask for anything in return. I didn't come to stay, he says softly. I didn't build it for you, I answer, equally soft. And that's the miracle. Neither of us lying, neither of us breaking. He takes one step back toward the door. Then it's perfect, I nod once. It is, he turns to leave. I watch him until the sea takes his outline, until the air forgets his shape. When I switch off the last light, our reflections merge briefly in the glass, not as one, but side by side, and in the hush that follows, velvet holds its scent, still, completely.